Yo, what's up? This is Jay Dennis, and we're back with another ranked video. And today we're going to be doing one of my all-time favorite bands, KORN. It's been a long time coming. If we look at my past ranked videos as precedent, though, I'm not going to make this one super long. Out of the 12 KORN albums I'm going to be doing, I'm not going to spend too much time on most of them, because if you want to see more of my in-depth thoughts on pretty much their entire discography, just go to my Talking Music playlist on my channel. And back in 2016, I went all the way from KORN's first album all the way up to Serenity of Suffering. But just like with this video, you might be thinking, oh, Jay, KORN has 13 albums, you know? No, I'm only doing 12. I'm doing KORN all the way up to The Nothing, which came out last year, and I'm excluding Path of Totality. And if you must know where I would rank it, it would be at the bottom. But I'm not talking about that album. I've tried giving it a couple of tries, and it's not a terrible album by any means, but it's just not my joint, all right? So not doing Path of Totality, but we're going from 1994 up to 2019, all the studio albums, excluding Path of Totality. The only album that I'm really going to be going into more depth with is probably their most recent album, The Nothing. Because again, all the other albums I've done a lengthier video on them, so this video is going to be mostly a ranking. And out of the 12 albums I'm going to be doing, I own 10 of the physical copies. So for the 2 that I don't have, I'll just put the album name on the screen. I don't have the best video software, so I can't put the artwork. I'd love to do that. It's just not in the cards right now. But let's get to it then. All right, so again, KORN's one of my favorite bands of all time. Huge influence on me. So just like with most ranked videos I do, I like, see value, or sometimes even love every album that I'm about to talk about. But I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I think I'm pretty satisfied with this ranking that I've done. There's a little bit of fluidity in how some of them change occasionally, but for the most part, I feel pretty good. These are pretty concrete positions. So, at number 12, we have KORN III. It's one of the albums I don't have physically. So, KORN III. I listened to it a couple times the last few weeks, and you know, ultimately it just sounded like one of those albums where a band was trying to get back into their old sound, and they were kind of struggling a little bit. And I think what KORN III suffers from the most is just a lack of hooks. And personally, I love hooks. Not to the point where I can't find value in deep substantive music or lyricism, but the hooks are what really do it for me, and that's why, you know, certain KORN songs are my favorite, or certain bands are my favorite, like Limp Bizkit. I mean, seriously, Limp Bizkit's not a super serious band, but they are super fucking catchy. So, yeah, KORN III is at the bottom. I believe it came out in 2010. I was listening to it as it was coming out. I didn't think it was a bad album. Still don't think it's a bad album. It's got a couple of good songs on there. It's like Fear is a Place to Live. Some of the singles are decent, but it just suffers from sounding like they're trying to be their old selves rather than actually being their old selves, or being where they should be, which was why some of the newer albums might be ranking higher up. So at the bottom spot, we have KORN III, Remember Who You Are. Again, it's got good songs on it, but just as a whole, it's at the bottom of the list for me. Number 11, we have Path of Totality, which is actually, Paradigm Shift. I had looked down at my shirt. This is actually a Paradigm Shift that my buddy Bryson got me. A quick shout out to his channel. It's called Bars Unlimited. Bars Unlimited. It's a reaction channel, and they've gotten me into a couple of new rap songs, so make sure you go check that channel out. Paradigm Shift. This album came out in 2013, I believe. I think this is the only KORN album since I got into them in 2006-ish. This is the only album that I didn't buy right away. It came out in 2013. I think I got it in 2014. I thought this one would be higher. You know, it's a great return album for Head, and there's definitely some bangers on here. You know, Pray For Me is a great opener, Love and Meth, Spike in My Veins. My favorite tracks off this album are Mass Hysteria and probably either Paranoid and Aroused or Victimized. So this was a great return album for Head, but the album is just disjointed. And at least to me, the last couple of tracks, aside from Victimized, are a little boring. And I must have been listening to the deluxe version or something, because I think there might have been some bonus tracks on Spotify. But out of the 11 on the original, most of them are good, but there's some dips, like What We Do, Lullaby for a Sadist, and It's All Wrong. It's not a fully cohesive album, and it is on the heavier side, but they still tried to like infuse some dubstep in there, and it wasn't to its detriment. To me, it's just not their best album, but it's slightly better than KORN III. I would say KORN III is more consistent from start to finish with less dips. It's just there aren't really any high peaks. With this album, the way it flows, there's a few peaks here and there. You know, Mass Hysteria is actually maybe probably in my top 20 KORN songs. But other ones like the singles like Never Never or Love and Meth, like they're good singles, but they're not like top tier. So number 11, we have The Paradigm Shift, The Path of Totality. Number 10, the other album I don't physically own, Untitled. Untitled is KORN's most experimental album. I pre-ordered it on iTunes back in 2007, and the first time I ever saw KORN was in 2007 during the Family Values tour. So I saw them tour this album, and when they play the songs off of Untitled live, they sound really good. And KORN is really good at being experimental, even with Path of Totality. But I heard somebody say they should have just done the one single with Path of Totality, the song with Skrillex, Narcissistic Cannibal, and just not done a whole album, and that might have been less of a stain on their history. I'm not entirely sure if I share that whole sentiment, but I get it. But no, Untitled is an excellent experimental album, and it's pretty damn consistent, and it actually aged really well. So that's why it's not at the complete bottom, because I think they did a good job experimenting, but it's not as everlasting or as timeless maybe as the albums that are closer to the top. So Untitled from 2007, first album, well not the first album, but another album without Head, and a good part of KORN's history at number 10. All right, number 9, See You on the Other Side, the other experimental album of KORN. This is the album that actually started it all for me. This was, I think, the first KORN album I ever owned, and this one definitely has a tremendous amount of sentimental value for me. You know, songs like Hypocrites, Getting Off, Liar, For No One, all a bunch of non-singles. Like, I love those KORN songs, especially Hypocrites. I've listened to that song a million times. I used to listen to this album all the time at the gym. Of course, there's a few tracks on here like Seen It All, Tearjerker, Throw Me Away, Love Song, Open Up, all like long, more storytelling, not heavy songs. The actual singles, Twisted Transistor and Coming Undone, are good KORN singles. I don't think they're towards the top, but like, I originally probably would have ranked this one higher, but just in retrospect, this is a heavier, I guess more refined version of their experimental sound, even though they got even more experimental in Untitled. This was a great precursor to what was to come in the experimental era of KORN, but this was a cool album, and again, I have a video going into more detail on this, so that's the number 9 spot. See You on the Other Side, amazing album. It aged pretty well. At number 8, it looks like, we have Life is Peachy. Now, don't get angry. Don't get angry at KORN's awesome sophomore release being at this spot, okay? Because as you can tell from here, it's all pretty much going to be heavy shit from here on out. The only reason why this is at the bottom of the great parts of KORN, which I fucking love all their albums, but come on. The reason why this one's at the middle bottom is because of the flow. You know, Twist is a fun song, but I don't think it's an album opener. Chi is a decent song, so it's kind of another first impression that's kind of one of KORN's weaker songs in my opinion. But where the album really picks up is at Lost, track 3, and Swallow. 2 of my favorite KORN songs ever. I think Lost is probably a top 10 KORN song for me, and Swallow is probably up there too. But there's a lot of good transition tracks in here. They kind of make the album seem more cohesive and flow better. Just making sure I'm not going way over time here. Longer than I expected. But yeah, it's a more evil sound of the rawness that you heard off their first album. And it's kind of the perfect midway point between the first album and the third album, Follow the Leader. But to me, this was just kind of one of their more disjointed efforts, but the peaks in this album are pretty damn good. So that's why it's among the best of the decent, I guess you would call it. There's some great songs on this album. I love this album. It actually aged really well for me. And this is a grower, for sure. And then next up, this was where the toss-up was. Which one do I put where? Next up, we have Take a Look in the Mirror. It was closely contested with Life is Peachy. But the reason why this one is slightly better, and this is album number 6, I think, came out in 2003. Last album with Head for a while. To me, from start to finish, this album is easily either the most or like the second most consistent. Start to finish, 13 tracks, 14 if you count the bonus track at the end of track 13. From start to finish, it's actually their most consistent album. But the reason why it's at this spot is because the singles aren't exactly top tier. Did My Time and Y'all Want a Single. They're not exactly KORN's most known singles. But the heaviness, the rawness, Jonathan Davis's screams sound particularly great here. This just sounds like a really raw version of Untouchables. And there's definitely, the fucking single Right Now. How could I forget? That's a great single, and the music video is pretty crazy too. But yeah, this is their most consistent album, and it kind of fits perfectly like in the middle of their whole ranking. Next up, we have their debut album, 1994, self-titled KORN 1. This is just another one of those deals where, I know most KORN fans would probably put this at the top, but not I. There are some bands that, even if their first release was an excellent release like this one, it doesn't fully show who they are yet. There are even pieces of Life is Peachy that show more maturity than this, but this album's higher up because it's a more cohesive, consistent sound from start to finish. And again, you have to look at it as like a snapshot in time. Which album seemed more like potent in the moment or in the year that it came out? And Peachy certainly did that, but this one probably did it a little bit more. This is just beautiful raw material, but this just isn't their most refined sound, and they hadn't totally hit their potential yet. So that's why KORN, self-titled, is here. We got 5 to go. Next up, this one surprised me. Next up, KORN's The Nothing, the most recent album. Has it been around a year since this came out? At the beginning of August? I think it came out I think it's been about a year since it came out. Anyway, because I got this and Slipknot's last album around the same time. This one's very sentimental to me. Last year when I was in Seattle, this thing was blaring the entire time. This album actually aged really well. It aged super well. When I did a mock KORN ranking like last year, I had this one towards the bottom, like at the number 10 spot. But what I realized about The Nothing, and what I never took away the value of the lyricism and the pain of Jonathan Davis's performance. Like, I never overlooked that or took that away. It was just a preference of sound and what musical tones and ideas came out of it. But upon listening to it again, I realized that this is KORN at like their most mature and at their most like they finally hit a groove. Not finally hit a groove. but like they've just this far into their career, them still making beautiful music like this, but just songs like The Darkness is Revealing and Gravity of Discomfort, those two songs are just epic. They're so heavy, they're so great. Idiosyncrasy sounds like fucking Got the Life Part 2. And they went for some different things here, but they did it very well. They got on the melodic side, but they didn't keep the album devoid of heaviness whatsoever in those particularly soft songs. This Lost, Can You Hear Me, they all still have some like heaviness behind the beautiful melodic sounds. And just sonically it sounds amazing. Jonathan Davis's voice still sounds incredible after all these years. And this is another album that took some growing. Initially, I just thought it was like 4 or 5 tracks that were really fucking good, but then I realized from start to finish, even the singles, Cold and You'll Never Find Me, those singles didn't warm up to me right away, but I realized they're actually really fucking good. So that's why this is at the 5 spot, The Nothing, 2019. And then next up, the previous album, Serenity of Suffering, the album that came out before The Nothing, so 2016. This album's probably actually gotten the most rotations out of any KORN album that I have. Came out in 2016. It was one of the albums that I graduated to. This was like a huge soundtrack to my graduating semester of college. Played a lot of Pokemon Go. If you listen to me talk about it on one of my other videos where I review this one, there's more to it there. But this one actually fell down. I used to think this was like their 3rd best album, but it fell down a spot. It was actually very closely contested between these two. But to me, there's just a teeny bit more sentimental value in this one, and a little bit more, I hate to say consistency, because there's still a few albums on this song that don't really resonate with me so much, like When You're Not There or Please Come For Me. But it doesn't mean I don't find value in them. But there's just more hooks on this album. I think that's why I gave it the slight edge over The Nothing. But Black is the Soul, The Hating, Next in Line, favorite tracks off this album. And the album's aged very well. And I still say that it's the perfect... It sounds like they were trying to reimagine pieces of Issues, Untouchables, and Take a Look in the Mirror all in the same album here. It just sounds like to me, this was the real comeback album with Head. Again, the Paradigm Shift wasn't a bad album, but to me, this was the ultimate comeback with Head. And it's brutally heavy and brutally beautiful in so many ways. Serenity of Suffering. Early on in the decade might have not been KORN's best albums, but their last few, top 5 albums for me. So KORN's fucking killing it, man. All right, number 3, Issues. This is another album that most people put at the top of their list from what I've seen, but to me, I've said this in other videos before, but it seems like every other KORN album, they either do like a solid start to finish album, or they have an album that has interludes in it. But the interludes kind of give like a storytelling element to certain albums, and that's what this album does. It tells a story. But start to finish, the consistency isn't as perfect as maybe with what we're about to see. But the singles off this album are fucking tragically good. Especially Trash. I love the song Trash. I've seen them play it live a few times, and it is just still one of my favorite KORN songs of all time. But it's really the non-singles that do it for me. Songs like Wake Up, Hey Daddy, and I think it's No Way. I love that song, No Way. But little interludes between the tracks are great. The only songs that are kind of fillerish to me are Beg For Me and Counting. And if those songs jive with you, great, but to me there's better tracks. But this album is just a snapshot of 1999. It's album number 4. They released it off the heels of Follow the Leader. So for them to do like back-to-back solid albums, like this was kind of KORN at their peak. I mean, it's not the number 1 album, but in terms of like the snapshot in time, Issues really shows how much they matured into the dark side of melodics after they put out Follow the Leader. And again, the pros of this album are just the powerful punches that most of the tracks offer, the beautiful storytelling elements of the little interludes that are in between. There's like maybe 3 or 4 of those on this album. And just where it lacks is there's like maybe 2 or 3 kind of fillerish tracks. That's why it didn't reach the top spot. But Issues is one of Korn's best albums. And if you haven't listened to it, listen to Wake Up. It's a nu metal classic. To me it is. And then like No Way. But if you need a single, listen to Trash. Of course, Falling Away From Me is iconic too. Number 2, Untouchables. The first 3, top 3 are pretty fluid, but I said earlier that See You on the Other Side was what started my Korn collection and my Korn journey. See You on the Other Side was what was the most relevant at the time, and then of course Untitled was the first album that I bought as it came out, and then from there on out, aside from KORN 3 and Paradigm Shift, you know, everything else I've got as it's come out. But Untouchables was really the first album on the heavier side of Korn that I listened to, and it was my sophomore year of high school. I listened to this album in the gym a lot, and I listened to it the summer of sophomore year going into junior year a lot. And this, much like Take a Look in the Mirror, is just a solid, perfect album from start to finish, but just the quality of the songs and the quality of a few other things surpasses Take a Look in the Mirror. And I listened to this again from start to finish, and it's aged beautifully. What were like my favorite songs back then are still pretty relevant right now, like in terms of where they're at with my favorite Korn songs. But it opens up heroically with Here to Stay. What I used to think was a dip in the album, I used to not like the song Make Believe, but it's kind of grown on me a little bit. But just from there on out, from Blame all the way to the end of No One's There, it's just an epic of big choruses that are loud and heavy and catchy, just brutally mixed guitar tones that are round and polished but still gut punching. Again, the big choruses, but then like in the middle of it, you've got these beautiful semi-experimental sounds that are unique to this album. Songs like Hollow Life or Alone I Break. The storytelling from this album from start to finish, the flow of it is nearly flawless. And again, it's partially preference and it's partially just sentimental value, but to me, and Jonathan Davis has said this is the album where I guess the band and himself were pushed the hardest to give like the best possible performances, and it really does shine on this album. This album was my favorite one for a long time, but obviously there's one left for other reasons, but Untouchables is nearly untouchable. Occasionally it creeps its way to the number 1 spot, but for the longest time this was my favorite Korn album. But let's get to number 1, Follow the Leader. Originally, like back in the day, this album, I lied, looks like this video will be a little bit longer. This album, it's a nu metal classic. That's all there is to it. But the reason why this is my favorite album is because my favorite Korn song is on this album. The first track, It's On. It's On is like one of my favorite songs of all time. Like, I'm not even being hyperbolic or trying to say phrases or expressions that I use a lot, like, oh, it's one of my favorites ever. It's like, no, literally the song It's On is my fucking jam. One of the best guitar riffs, one of the best nu metal sounds, some of the best lyrics, some of the best hooks. And then of course it leads beautifully into a nu metal classic, Freak on a Leash. And then it leads into another perfect nu metal classic, Got the Life. And then it fucking leads into one of the heaviest songs that Korn's ever written, The Lost of Follow the Leader, Dead Bodies Everywhere. I've seen them play it live, and it's just so beautifully heavy. This album came out in 1998. It was their 3rd album, and damn it, this is the most potent, the most absolute perfect crown jewel of this genre. And it wasn't my favorite for a while because the second half of the album was a little bit complex for me, but over time, the album as a whole grew on me. And just, again, it's all about preference and just how potent the sound was at the time. You know, you've got more rap features on this one. You have Ice Cube and Children of the Corn. You got BBK, which there's no rap there, but like it's just a heavy low-end track. Same thing with Pretty. More of the melodic stuff is just on the creepier, still gritty, kind of grungy side, actually, compared to like more of the clean singing you hear in Issues or Untouchables. But this is definitely among their heaviest albums in terms of like the low-end sound and Jonathan Davis's vocal performance with the growling and everything. Even with like a goofy song like All in the Family, where Fred Durst and Jonathan Davis are having a rap battle, it adds to the charm, even if the lyrics aren't super serious or anything. But Reclaim My Place, Justin, they're heavy, catchy guitar riffs coupled with great vocals that really complement it. And again, it just ends on a very mature note with tracks like Seed, Cameltosis, and most importantly, My Gift to You. I didn't say this with Untouchables because it closes with an epic, no one's there, but My Gift to You is a fucking epic of a closer. But the reason why Follow the Leader is number one is because my favorite KORN song is on this album. And again, it's just the most perfect depiction of a snapshot in time, what was going on in 1998. Turn of the century nu metal. This is easily one of the best albums of all time. And it comes down to preference, but KORN has an amazing discography, and it's not super easy to rank these albums. And again, it can be a little fluid at times, but that is ultimately my ranking for KORN. Thank you guys for listening. Let me know below what your favorite albums are, what you agree with, what you don't agree with, why you put an album at the bottom, at the top, pretty much all that. But if you want to see more insights where I talk longer about each of these albums, go to my Talking Music playlist and you'll see from like 2016, like 10 videos in a row of me, or maybe 8 videos in a row, because there were a few videos where I grouped 2 albums together. If you want to see more of those insights, go to that. My appearance hasn't changed too much, I think. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe to the channel. And again, to my friend who got me this shirt, go check out his channel, Bars Unlimited. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.